Today we're going to talk about the law of opposites and how we can use this information to solve problems. We're also going to talk about how we can use this information to listen better and to achieve a meditation practice called the Duality. And more than solving problems, we can also use this information to awaken our consciousness, as it says here in this quote. Action free from the duality of the mind brings about the awakening of consciousness. The duality of the mind is sometimes called dual vision, and it's this very same law of opposites that we're going to talk about today. When we understand this duality and we learn to overcome it, then it brings about the awakening of consciousness, which is, of course, what we're after in these classes. We're after the full development of the essence, the freedom of the essence to act and speak for itself without the ego, free from the ego. So what is dual vision? Well, when we have dual vision, we don't see things as they are, but we see them as we interpret them. We live in a world of comparisons, where things are described as how they are in relation to other things. For example, if somebody is described as tall, it means he is not short. And in our society and in life, we only look at things this way. We only see them in relation to something else as a comparison, based on the memory of how we relate to them and our preconceptions that we formed over time. It means that we look at everything with already an opinion or an idea about it. This is the key way that the ego sustains itself in our minds and in our emotions. It is the foundation of the ego. As we said at the beginning of this paragraph, we don't see things as they are, but through the filter of the mind. How does it work? It works, as we said, through comparison. So the mind compares. A man will compare his wife with other women. A woman will compare her husband with other men. Teachers at school compare students. Students likewise compare teachers, and they also compare themselves with each other. This starts from an early age. Envy comes as the result of comparison. We envy people's houses, for example, cars, their abilities, their status, their intellectual abilities, and we can even envy each other's spiritual abilities as well. The mind divided by comparison kills love. We don't give these things the same appreciation. It is fairly easy to see this dual vision or this duality when we are listening. If we are listening to somebody, we might start off by listening, but then we start listening to our own thoughts. And in listening to our own thoughts, which happens fairly soon after a conversation has begun, we stop listening to the person and we become fascinated and blindsided by our own thoughts, our own ego. These are the thoughts of our inner secretary. These thoughts filter, direct and translate everything that we hear in accordance with our own preconceptions, fears, pride, anxieties, ideas, memories, etc. We listen very well to ourselves, our own ego, and that mind is not willing to listen to what it's actually hearing. The mind is conditioned by the memory. You probably notice that even when we're reading something, but we might already be thinking about something that happened to us or something we think about that. If we want to know how to listen, we should live in accordance with the present moment, because the truth is unknown from moment to moment. Only in a state alert to novelty, receptive, with a receptive mind, can we listen without the intervention of the ego. And it's important that we sustain this alert state, that we maintain this self-remembrance state, living from moment to moment. The essence is at the center of the mind, and when the duality ceases to exist, the mind then is integrated, serene, quiet, is no longer comparing, and the essence awakens. Mind then becomes a useful tool rather than an obstacle, and not in the flow of existence. Here's an example where the essence can simply look. Imagine if we stumbled across a view like this on a walk, and we said, "What a beautiful mountain." This is what we are talking about, seeing things as they are. It's a divine exclamation to say, "Oh, what a beautiful mountain," and to just see it as it is. However, the minute we start comparing this mountain range with another mountain range, or with the time that we visited another country some other time ago, or we immediately start thinking about technical details of the mountains, then we've already lost that pure vision. We've gone into the dual vision. Here's another example. What a beautiful sunset. When we look and see the true astonishing beauty of a sunset, we just look at it and we exclaim, what a beautiful sunset. And we just see it for what it is. Then we are seeing it as it is. Then we are seeing it with a receptive mind, an open mind. We are not clouded by the duality. But the minute we start comparing, the minute we start putting conditions onto the sunset, like, say, it was better yesterday, or are those clouds this particular type, then already the dual vision has taken over, and we no longer see the scene. Our minds have taken over what we see. Mind makes us look at everything through a filter, and it's this filter of opposites. So we see things from the point of view of happiness, sadness, pleasure, pain, good, bad, triumph, defeat, success, failure, like, dislike, and so on. And we go from one side to the other. We are mostly looking always for the positive and running away from the negative. But they are actually two sides of the same coin. For example, if we were to go to a party every day, soon that party, which we would consider to be a pleasurable event, would soon turn out to be a boring event, and it would end up being a negative thing. They are both imposters. If we are looking for happiness, we are not looking for that which is real. We are looking for our version of happiness, our version of good and pleasure and triumph and success. And we are not seeing the real. We are not seeing the truth from moment to moment. In these instants, we are not living in the moment because we're always looking to see how we can get here and how we can avoid here. And so we see everything in these terms. We go from like to dislike, want to don't want. And it's a continuous movement from left to right. In the end, you could even say we just go round and round, really. Just going around and round from positive to negative and so on. So in this case, we are caught by the law of opposites. The positive side and the negative side hold us firm on either one side or another. And this is how the ego is founded. This is the foundation of the ego. This is where the strength of the ego finds itself. It always wants us to be placed on one side or the other. Let's have a look at our daily routine. So the minute we wake up, we may already find that we are on a positive or a negative side. For example, we might consider what our dreams were like. If our dreams were good, maybe then we'll feel happy. If our dreams were bad, then maybe we'll have a negative inner state and we'll feel sad. And we'll bring that negative inner state to whatever we're doing in the day. What we should do is, as soon as we have the dream, note the dream, see what it is, and then discard that emotion that comes along with the dream. If it gives us information, then we have that information, but we don't need to compare it to being good or bad. All of these comparisons go on throughout the day. We get up. Shall I wear these clothes or those clothes? The weather's good, the weather's bad. What will I eat for breakfast? Will I eat this or will I eat that? And we continue from side to side, continually comparing one thing to the other, one option with another option. These opposites fill our thoughts and condition our emotions all day long. Here we have an image of a young man looking in the mirror, obviously thinking he's looking very old. And what's he going to do about that? Here's an old man thinking, look at me, I'm in the prime of my life. I'm looking great. I'm looking fine here. Neither are seeing things as they are. They're seeing things through the filter of their own judgment, of their own preconditions, of their own prejudice in those moments. What we are looking for is conscious action. Conscious action cuts through both of these sides. Conscious action takes us out from the positive and the negative and leaves us conscious. You can try conscious action right now for yourselves. Make a fist. Feel that you've made a fist. We're not making a problem of it, we're just feeling it. There's no decision there, there's no good or bad. We just acted, we just made that fist. Now feel your feet. Just feel your feet. There's no need to compare, contrast, good or bad. It's an action that we've done. We carry forward this action then to our daily tasks. If we are walking, walk. If we are eating, eat. Whatever it is that we are doing, we should be doing it. In the same way as we just made a fist or we just felt our feet. When one closes the door to fantasy, one awakens the organ of intuition. The minute we act consciously, then we are away from the fantasy. We've closed the door to fantasy. We are doing what we are doing. And in doing what we are doing, then the organ of intuition can start to develop. Intuition is activated when the ego is absent from the mind. Action free from the struggle of opposites is intuitive action. This is action to the full. And where there is fullness, the ego is absent. Intuitive action leads us by the hand to the awakening of consciousness. So this is how escaping from the duality of the mind leads us to the awakening of the consciousness. When we are away from the duality of the mind, we are above the duality of the mind. Then the essence acts, and then our action is intuitive. Then we know what to do, we know what to say. And in those actions, the ego is absent because we're seeing things as they are. Here's another quote. Let us work and rest happily, yielding to the course of life. Let us drain the muddy, putrid waters of habitual thought, and into the emptiness will flow gnosis, which means knowledge, and with it the joy of living. The true happiness, the true peace and joy, away from the struggle of opposites, comes when we learn to live moment by moment. When we're caught up in our muddy, putrid thoughts, as he says here, then we simply move from one opposite to the other, sustaining and creating all kinds of problems for ourselves. This brings us to how to use this information to solve problems. If we consider that problems of life are mental forms with two poles, one positive and the other negative. Generally, we want something good and we want to avoid something negative. But a problem brings these two sides precisely into focus. Then problems are maintained by the mind, and they are created by the mind. When we stop thinking about a problem, it inevitably ends. This is something that we can try for ourselves to see how true it is. In our lives, we're very used to using the mind to solve a problem. But with this information, we're saying that the mind cannot solve a problem by itself. What the mind simply does is create a problem and sustain the problem. So, to solve a problem, what we need to do is escape from the mind rather than engage with it. To escape from the mind, we can simply change our activity. Go for a walk, listen to some music, talk to a friend, visit a neighbour. Do something that's completely different to the problem that we have. Deliberately stop thinking about the problem. When we stop thinking about the problem, and then we come back to it, and at some point in due course, then a solution will present itself. By taking ourselves out of the problem, then we can find the solution. Passing through the opposites in the mind, going around and around in circles, adding and subtracting the different aspects of the problem, simply make the problem worse and make the problem go on for longer. It does seem counterintuitive, but it is worth experimenting to see if this would actually work. Sometimes people in creative companies are often told when they're coming up with something new to stop thinking about it, what they're creating, and do something completely different, to take a break. It's the same way for studying as well. If you're studying something and you're having difficulty understanding it, simply put it to one side, leave it to one side, do something completely different, and when you come back to it, then the problem seems a lot less troublesome than it was. The understanding then often just arrives. We can also use this information of the law of opposites in a meditation practice called the Duality. We spoke about this a few weeks ago when we were talking about meditation. First, relax the body, concentrate, and then observe the thoughts. And as each thought arrives, place the opposite thought to that one. And then you can see them as two sides of the same coin. Having seen one thought as the opposite of another, then we discard that thought, having seen them for what they are. Here's a further description of how the duality works. So we have on one side a positive thought, and then we simply place the negative aspect of that thought on the other side. And then those two thoughts, when we see them for what they are, on the one side and the other, two sides of the same coin, then we cancel them out. And in doing so, the essence becomes stronger, because the essence is the one that sees one side and the other side. It sees the two sides of the same coin. And when we see them, both of those thoughts, then we cancel them out. The mind then is quiet. Each thought is countered with the opposite thought, and bit by bit the mind gives up and quietens down. And then when the mind becomes quiet and silent, then the essence has a chance to escape and to achieve the practice called meditation. It has a chance to escape from the bounds of the mind and go to the causal dimension. I was looking for some visual representations of what this separation is like. It is related to non-identification. We're simply not identified with the thought, whatever that thought might be. It's rather like seeing things from a bird's eye view. In this case, we have the bird sitting, looking over the city of New York. It would be very different if we were down here, say, or down here on the road. We wouldn't see anything. We would simply see those houses that are there amongst us. But from above, we're able to see the whole vista. So, from the essence's point of view, he can see the positive thought and the negative thought and rise above them both. Another representation I thought of was a story in which a farmer planted an oak forest. He planted 5,000 oaks, rather like this one, and anyone walking through this particular wood would just simply see the trees in this manner. But when seen from above, he's actually planted his oak forest in this shape so that he dedicated the field, the forest, to his wife, and he planted throughout the whole field, just leaving a heart shaped in the middle. This is not visible from the previous view, but rising above it, then more things are visible. This is really the analogy I'm talking about, that we don't see things as they are when we're caught up in them, but when we see things from above, then we see more of the reality. So this is a very practical lecture, and one which we can use for a great deal of benefit in our inner work. First of all, try solving a problem using the technique mentioned in the talk. Whatever the problem is, stop thinking about it for a period of time, and when we come back to it, having completely stopped thinking about it, then the solution should present itself. In addition, try and refine our listening skills. Try and see the inner secretary that dictates what it is that we should hear. Learn to live in the present moment, and listening will become more refined. We will be more conscious in the present moment, and we will be listening to them clearly without putting the filter of the mind or the commentary of our own minds onto it. Check also our daily routine. How caught up in the struggle of opposites are we in our own daily routine? Check the first thoughts that you have and the corresponding inner state then, first thing in the morning. Have a look and see how the mind dominates us from the very moment that we wake up. What kind of conflicts and struggle of opposites do we encounter? Have a look at them and try and overcome them. Don't give any time to them. Try and act consciously. Conscious action is what we're looking for. We often say as well, be both the teacher and the student. See what you have in front of you and then determine a course of action. You can certainly check the video on conscious action. Conscious action is an action where the consciousness is involved and not the mind. It is where we simply do. Remember how we said make a fist or put your attention in your right foot? It is simply an action without any distractions or abstractions. That action, that consciousness, that escape from the duality of the mind will eventually lead us to the awakening of consciousness. Any questions, as usual, email us on info@htsk.ie.